name's Roberto, and I've been in treatment for about 3.5 months at this center, and then a month before that, with an outside therapist. So I had my first suicide ideation was in August, and it's just the thought of like killing yourself or committing suicide or something along those lines. It's not really planning, right? And they typically will ask you like, did you plan? Did you attempt? Right, and that kind of gauges where you're at. For me, it was just like the thought came up. I've never joked about it. I've never, some people will make jokes when they're overwhelmed or something, and I never did. So it really freaked me out, right? Puts you into like a panic state of like, what is going on? Like, you know, why is that thought there? I've never thought that before. So yeah, that was my introduction into needing to seek treatment. So I guess background for me is I'm a type A person, right? Like just get a lot of stuff done, like at any cost. Like I've been successful in my career because of it, and it's worked out for me. But there's a couple of things that happened in August with like family and medical, like scares, right? That kind of push you in a direction that you can't cope with, right? There's nothing that you're type A. There's nothing that you grew up with or that made you successful that can help you cope with that. And I think it was the first time in my life that I truly felt overwhelmed. And when I got to that overwhelmed, I think when I realized that I was overwhelmed is when I had the ideation. Where it's like, well, fuck it. At this point, no, I don't know if you can cuss or not, but at this point, like, I might as well just kill myself, right? And then you just get shocked where you're like, wait, why? And you're trying to like, and that's always the hardest part, right? Is asking yourself the why. It's like I don't know why, right? And I don't understand it, and so that just makes it worse, and you just start spiraling. But for me, it was I got overwhelmed. There's nothing in my tool set of life that I could use to deal with that overwhelmedness, and I'm not comfortable being overwhelmed because, when you're type A and you're constantly trying to do stuff, you don't, overwhelmed isn't like a word in your vocabulary, right? You just find a way to get it done. As a kid, in like the machista household, right? You don't necessarily ever get praises, right? You don't like if you take these little steps, right? Like you're doing homework or doing something, it's your parents will not congratulate you, but they won't yell at you when you're done and you did it correctly. So I think as a kid, you don't understand um like the cues that they're giving you that you did well, right? Instead it's just like how come they don't like tell me anything, right? And so then you start doing things faster and you start doing things differently and you're trying to do it more right and you're trying to do it this to try to get their attention to like tell you something. But the only time that they'll ever tell you something is when you mess up. So what ends up happening, at least for me, is that I never paid attention to my successes, right? I never like we bought a house, right? And we never thought we were gonna buy a house in LA, and then we bought, an amazing house, and I never appreciated it. It was just like, what's the next thing, right? But if I make a mistake, I will dwell on it for a long time and not let it go. And it's because of those little things in my childhood that you they were almost exaggerated, right? Where you did well, then they don't say anything, right? They don't tell you like, I'm proud of you or something. And those are little things that kids need, right? And not even kids, everybody as a human being wants to hear like, I'm proud of you for like, putting the studio together, right? You hear that and you're just like, thank you, right? And so you end up in this whole world where you're looking for external validation, like you're looking for praises, right? Because you didn't get them as a kid, and I guess you don't learn how to praise yourself. So I don't remember ever telling myself until recently when you're going through therapy that I'm like, damn, like I'm proud of what I did. The only thing I remember is like, damn, like I really messed that up. It's like, cool, I bought a house. All right, cool, move on. It's very like it's so weird because it doesn't make sense to your adult mind that like this little kid or your young self is needs that. But if your parents don't know how to give that, then you're kind of stuck, right? And there's like Brene Brown's like whole vulnerability thing, right? that for me, I didn't want to be vulnerable anymore. I didn't want to be shamed. I didn't want to feel bad. So you stop like feeling, right? And so like you don't like the moments that I know I should be super happy, I'm not. The moments I know I should be super sad, I'm not. And it's because it's like a defense mechanism of like, I don't want my dad to come around the corner and yell at me for something that I haven't done. So what do? You just don't feel anything. And so, like, all of that stuff, like, with time, you kinda use it to your advantage, right? You're type A. You go through school, you push hard, you learn hard, you do everything you can. Go into the tech world and start moving up and, like, going through all these things and, like, being considered successful. But for me, it was like, you get raises and promotions and you think, "Damn, like, how could they do that?" Like, they didn't I'm glad they didn't see all the mess ups that I made. I'm glad that they didn't figure out, like, and you're constantly like, because your dad didn't yell at you because, it's like, damn, I didn't do that right. But, I didn't get in trouble. Like, okay, that's good. And it's weird as an adult. You're just like, how does that make any sense? But like that stuff is so ingrained into you that you're always like walking around eggshells, not trying to piss people off because when you were a kid, that thing just, you couldn't talk back to your dad so you don't get into arguments with people. You try to like be ahead of the game and predict if someone's mad at you because it's like, you're trying to like walk around eggshells, make sure everything's cool. So it's just like, it's so wild because you don't realize that all those little things as a kid impact you as an adult. And then like you don't understand, or I didn't understand that it doesn't make sense, but that's how the brain works. And and at the same time, when people like when people first tell you that, you're just like, this is dumb. Like, there's no way. Like, I'm an adult. Like, how am I gonna think like that? And then you start working through it, and you're like, yeah, damn. Like, they really messed me up, and I didn't understand how or why. But yeah, like, yeah, I totally understand. Like the one that really got me was the therapist said people in your situation, they call themselves losers. They call themselves that they're not worth anything, that they're, all these like negative things. And I told her I've never once told myself that. And she said, "But you're scared that people are going to find out you're like that. If you don't think you're like that, why are you scared someone's going to find out?" And that just like blew my mind. I'm like, crap, like it's like a coping mechanism to not call myself that, but to like prepare myself in case someone is going to call me that and then tell them it's not true. But in reality, like you only do that if you think it is true internally. You just don't realize it. My ideation was August 13th. August 30th, my wife asked me, something's wrong. What's wrong? Right? We've been married for 11 years. Like she knows me. And it was, I think, the hardest thing I've done in my life to like tell, the person that you love that, you had suicidal ideations. And but I think that weekend was my rock bottom because I don't know if I thought to myself, I'm broken, I gotta figure out how to fix this or something's wrong. But I was just like, if I can't tell this person, there's no one that I can tell. And so I told her, right? And that weekend was very hard because you kind of confront it. Like, was the most despair I've ever felt, like the saddest I've ever felt. And it's a weird feeling because I said I shut down all of my emotions to not feel shame. And you, I didn't know what I was feeling. Like there's like a weekend later where I went to go visit my mom and I felt the same way. I didn't understand. And I hugged her and I just started crying. Like just broke down, bawled, get into the car and my wife and I told my wife, I think I'm sad. I think this is what sadness feels like. And then about a week later, I got put on medication that didn't work for me, right? It increased the ideations, right? It wasn't a good one for me, and I had like a very specific ideation, and I told my wife, I'm like, I think we should go to the hospital, and I had been anxious for like 3 weeks since I told her up to that point, or 2 weeks, and we go to the hospital, and it's like this like moment of clarity where I feel like no ideation, just going to the hospital. And and it was like, okay, I kind of like I don't want to say it was rock bottom, because my rock bottom was the despair, but it was like an acceptance of like, you know what, I need help. And I'll admit that what made it possible for me was the support of my wife, and also my sister's gone through a lot of the same thing. And she told me like 3 years ago, you should go to therapy, because she started going to therapy. She's like, it's great. And I was like, nah, like, what for? I'm fine. And then you're in that boat, and I'm like, yeah, like she was right. Like, I understand now, right? And it's like, because someone else that you respect and that you really love is going through it, then you realize, well, for one, like, there shouldn't be a stigma to it, right? Because it's helping her. Like, you see the difference in how it's going with her, and then you see that like it's actually working, and there's nothing wrong with it, right? Like, we all need help. Like, there's an issue with any other part of your body, you go to the doctor, but the second it's about your brain and how you think, then it's like, ooh, like something's wrong with you. But because she was going, I was like, you know what? I need to figure my stuff out. So yeah, I go to the psych ward and stay there for 6 days, and they changed my meds, and it worked great, right? And then I get out, and my therapist, we talk about it, and she said, it seemed like you really like group therapy. And I was like, yeah, it was awesome, right? And so she's like, well, if you liked it, you should look for it. And my wife ended up calling Solace, and I think it was like I don't know if it was the first or second person, right? But you talked to Styles, and just all like super helpful and everything. And then you're here, and I've been here 3.5 months, right? And it's it's one of those weird things where, how do I describe it? I'm not a substance, like, I'm not an addict or anything, but you realize that they're all in the same boat, and all the things that, like, their coping mechanism was just different than mine, right? Mine was, I just worked my ass off to like distract myself from the feeling of shame. People just take a different path. I was a workaholic. And yeah, like, you start to connect with these people, and you start to realize, man, we're all in the same boat. We all just, do things differently. And then they start talking about what they went through, how they went through, and you start like connecting dots, and people give you great like advice, and you start realizing you're giving advice, and then you like all start connecting. The therapist, that like, it just like it all starts to like slowly click, as long as you're willing to listen, and as long as you're willing to, um how does it go? The more you put into it, the more you get out of it. And you just feel comfortable, right? Because you're not like, no one's shaming you. You talk about your trauma and like the stuff that your parents did to you, or how you feel about this, or how you feel about that. People will talk about why they started using, and like, like why they continued, why they relapsed. And you're just like, yeah, man, like, and then you start just feeding off of each other, and like trying to like support each other, and like fully understand like that it's not easy, right? And you're not the only one. I think it's just, I came across a wall where I couldn't get over. And, like, there's so many people, like, I'd imagine everybody hasn't hit that wall. Either that, or they're just, they had good coping skills that were put into them as kids. I think the biggest thing is that you're not alone, and that there's people that are willing to help, and you don't realize that the people that are willing to help, that are going to make the biggest impact in your life, are the ones that have gone through it. It's like one thing, like a doctor who's never been an addict telling someone like, oh, I'm so sorry, that's so on and so on, but they don't get it, right? But then you end up at a lot of these treatment centers, or groups, or AA, NA, like, so many different opportunities, avenues out there to talk to people, to find someone that gets you. And they'll say things in a way that just clicks, right? Because it's not coming from a place of, I've studied it, and I've met a lot of people that have gone through this. They'll come from a place of like, dude, I've been in that hole. Like, I get it. Like, I get it. Like, I've been in the hole, man. Like, this is what worked for me. And then if that doesn't like if that person, doesn't get you all the way there because you're in these groups that there's more people, it's like, oh dude, I've been in that hole too. And little by little you start piecing together advice and discovering things about yourself where you can start making your way out of the hole. And I think that's something that I wish wasn't stigmatized in our society. But like at some point you just say, fuck it, like I want to figure myself out. I want to live a better life. I want to be happy. And there's days that like they're harder than others, right? But I think the wild part is that everybody has that. It's just that you know it, you get it, you understand it, right? It's like, damn, dude, today's hard. Today the goal is to just survive and figure out what happens tomorrow. But when you haven't gone through this and you feel bad, you're trying to figure out why. And sometimes you don't know why. You're human, you're imperfect. Like a cold gets you, you're whatever, right? But I think the biggest thing is that you're not alone. There's so many people that have gone through what you're going through. And if you don't understand it, with some work around people that genuinely will want to help you, you'll get there.